Hello and welcome to Just Ride Bikes. I'm David and this is a brand new Parlee Taos, or is it Taos? I do believe it's Taos, not to be confused with the Volkswagen SUV of the same name. But like that SUV crossover, this is a crossover between aero gravel bikes and mountain bikes, somewhere in the middle. As you can see from the frame, a very compact, massively sloping top tube. It does look like a mountain bike with a drop handlebar on, and definitely at the more progressive end of the gravel spectrum, in the same company as the likes of a Merida Silex, a Vidya Adler, and a few others that definitely take more inspiration from mountain bikes when it comes to the reach, the head angle, and all the other key geometry numbers. Now, this isn't the US company's first gravel bike. They launched a Tubacco back in 2018, which I reviewed when I was at Road CC, but that was more of a road-based gravel bike. It was a great road bike as well as an all-road gravel bike back then in the early days of this gravel scene. But now this definitely moves the goalposts a long way from that original. It has nothing in common at all. All new frame, all new philosophy around the geometry and the way the bike is designed, and the capability it offers as a result. And like those other mountain bike inspired gravel bikes, the reach is much longer, designed around a short stem and wide handlebar to give more capability when riding off-road, better handling through the corners and twisty stuff. And does mean when you are looking at the sizing chart on the website, you can be misled by the reach and stem figures. So you have to really look at the reach and the stem together and not the reach in isolation, and make sure you get the right size. The bike also has a very tall front end as well, and a much longer fork than you normally get on a gravel bike, and does look a bit odd. There's all this space here between the tyre and the fork crown, but that's because it's designed to accept a suspension fork which is longer from the axle to the crown than a conventional rigid fork. So odd look, yes, but does mean if you want to fit a suspension fork, the geometry won't be messed up and will be the same as with a fork here. How many people want to fit suspension to a gravel bike remains to be seen, because it's not really caught on in the way I expected, given my positive views of suspension fork testing over the last few years. I think for many people it's a step too close to a mountain bike, and you might as well buy a mountain bike if you want suspension on a bike like this. But if you want to fit a suspension fork to a gravel bike and not ruin the geometry, this one is designed from the outset to accept that bouncy fork. Right, so the frame set itself is made from carbon fibre, as you can see. But rather than being made in Asia, where most frames are made, it's actually made in Europe. So that's kind of cool. And then there's a nude carbon finish. There are paint options, which Parlee have a good reputation for, but this nude finish allows the carbon workmanship to be fully on display, which I really like. I like seeing the raw carbon fibre finish, but I think lots of people aren't used to how carbon layout does look, and it's not always that pretty in certain areas of the frame. So I know that might be a bit polarizing, but let me know what you think by dropping a comment down below. The frame then has space with 50mm wide tyres, so pretty much on trend. Full internal routing, compatible with different systems on the market, and it's electronic group set compatible only, so no mechanical group sets, which is a shame perhaps. We then have a UDH dropout, so you can fit SRAM's brand new Explore group set, and whatever Shimano might have planned for the future. Down tube storage, another very common feature on gravel bikes. Down tube bash protection to protect the frame from rock strikes, and a round seat post and an external seat clamp. And the weight on the scales is on the screen right now, so you can see what it actually weighs. Right, time to go for a ride and see how the bike performs. But first, a big shout out to Michelin for sponsoring today's video, and I'm using their Power Gravel tyre. It's a fast rolling tyre, good in a range of conditions and different surfaces, dry and wet, easy tubeless installation, and in this massive 47mm width, superb comfort as well. And for reviewing bikes, having a controlled tyre like this makes a lot of sense and really helps me remove the tyre variable from testing a gravel bike. It comes in a wide range of sizes, black and tan sidewall options, and you can find out more about the tyre and the full range at the link down below. Right, let's hit the trails and go for a ride. Right, here we are in my local woods. I've done about 20 miles of road to get here, but now onto the fun stuff and see how the bike handles. And the most immediate impression of the bike is how high the front end is, much higher than a typical gravel race bike like a Canyon Grail, for example. So it does feel very high at first and might take you a while to get used to coming from a racier gravel bike or a road bike. But once you head off road and you get into the woods, it makes a lot of sense. And because the front end is so much higher, it does encourage you, force you to use the drops. So you then have more control. The wider flared handlebars, better through the corners, but you're still not super low. You're not slammed at the front. I've got good visibility. My fit on the bike still feels nice and comfy. Plenty of stiffness on the frame, getting the gas through the corners. The only real limitation right now are the brakes are back to front, which takes some getting used to. Nice dry conditions today. Makes a change from the mud we've had the last few months. Oh, I just carry speed into the corner so well. That high front end, you're in a much better position to control the bike, to deal with any hurdles that might come your way, roots and rocks, and it's definitely much calmer at high speed as well. The wheelbase is also long too, so it's a very steadfast bike on rough sections and high speed trail situations. They're definitely more towards the mountain bike end of the gravel spectrum and does remind me of the Merida Silex, the Video Adler, and a few others I've ridden which have a similar sort of geometry setup with that 69.5 degree head angle, which is much slacker than a 71 of a racier gravel bike. So definitely more adventure, fun, focused than race optimized, which I think for most people, unless you're actually racing, makes a lot more sense. The bike came with a 40mm wide Goodyear tyre, which is fine on smooth trails, road. You want a speed optimized setup, but really held the bike back in terms of unleashing the capability the geometry offers and also comfort. So going to 47mm Michelin tyres, which actually measure 50 on these rims, gives the bike way more comfort, way smoother on the rough stuff, and more traction for when you're smashing down the fun single track. So definitely go to a wide tyre. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. No surprise really, but it shows how important a tyre is on a bike like this and how tricky it is for a company to spec a good tyre for use around the world. But I think they could go wider, 45 at least, to give the bike the tyre it deserves from the outset. Any gravel bike needs to be good on the road too. Let this car go past. Mustang Mach-E. Yeah, because you might have a route that's a mixture of road and off-road, as I do here in the Cotswolds. So you want a bike that can roll well on the road and doesn't really hold you back too much. And even with the big tyres on, it's still a good road bike. Supreme comfort on the crappy roads and quite a relaxed fit, similar to an endurance road bike, and good gear range for a 2x GRX. So for knocking out the road miles, yeah, it feels good. And equally, you can go down to a smaller, slicker road tyre. Got the flip chip and the fork dropout to adjust the fork offset and therefore a trail. It's definitely a bike that's very happy doing road, gravel and single track trails, where some racier gravel bikes are better on road and smooth gravel and less good on single track. see that. So this is where the Parlee really comes into its own. That geometry, a high front end, a slack head angle, make it calmer, easy to handle through the corners and over these little roots here. Like more weight higher and back over the bike. I'm not being pitched over the front end like a steeper, lower setup would be. Comfort is okay, but it's still quite bumpy on these routes. Running the tyres at super low pressure, so like 25 psi today. Definitely more comfort from the back of the bike, and definitely a bit more jarring through the handlebars and through the fork. It would be awesome to try a bike with a suspension fork as well, given there's no change impact to the geometry, similar to the Giant Revolt X, designed around a suspension fork. So that would definitely be a way to go if you are really trying to set the bike up for riding very technical, tame mountain bike trails. But then the whole conversation around, are you better off on a mountain bike? And it does look like a mountain bike, it does ride more like a mountain bike than racier gravel bikes I've tried over the last few years. Okay, let me share some likes and dislikes before wrapping up today's review of the Parlee Taos. Firstly, the price. It's in line with other sort of high-end carbon gravel bikes from Envy, Specialized, Carnago and others. And this bike retails for about £10,000 in the UK, which is a big chunk of cash. There are lower price models and you can buy a frame set and build it yourself, but definitely a premium price. But worth remembering, the frame is made in Europe and not Asia, as most frames are, so it might account for the higher production cost of the frame. And the parts on the bike are pretty good for the money. The Shimano GRX Di2 2x works really well. I do prefer 1x. Personally, the simplicity of not having a front mech and wide range, big range cassettes. I'm not really a fan of the FSA K-Wing handlebar. It's okay, the shape and stuff, but it does look a bit funky. So not my favorite handlebar in the world, but I do like the Ergon saddle, the all-road saddle with that layer of elastomer in there for extra comfort, and the Zip 303S wheels. I do like the down tube storage. I think it's a good feature on these bikes, and this one works really well with a nice button activated mechanism and no rattling when you have your gummy bears or your tools inside there. We've got mounts for top tube and extra bottle down there. No mudguard or fender mount, so looser point for that versatility that a bike like this should have, in my opinion. But we do have a round seat post, which is dropper compatible. And the comfort of the bike is generally pretty good. It's definitely pretty good in the saddle, but the front end is quite hard. When you hit roots at full speed, it's quite a jarring impact through the handlebars and the forks, so the front end isn't as smooth as it could be. And I would love to try a bike with a suspension fork, given it is suspension fork corrected in terms of fork length. And whether this is the right bike for you or not depends on the riding you do. You either go for the aero, race, gravel, road bike with fat tyre setup like a Canyon Grail, for example, or a mountain bike inspired bike like this, and like the Villiers Adlard and Maria Silex, which has that slacker geometry, the longer wheelbase, the higher front end, and definitely designed more for tackling rough trails, technical trails, less about racing and more about having adventure, bike packing and having fun, but still versatile as well for road, gravel and single track trails. And definitely a bike that performs well in that company of the bikes I mentioned that have similar geometry numbers. So it really comes down to the rider you do, and you can answer that. Let me know by dropping a comment down below whether you're into aero gravel racing or adventure bike packing fun times on a bike like this. So definitely a bike to consider if you are in the market for that sort of mountain bike inspired, slacker, more capable gravel bike, and it ticks your sort of boxes in terms of down tube storage, wide tyre clearance. Shame there's no mudguard, fender mount, so really. And yes, yeah, quite a pricey bike, but in line with other sort of high-end options right now. So yeah, a lot to like, a few things to maybe gripe about. But let me know what you think of this bike and the review by dropping a comment down below. And if you want to see some other gravel bikes to consider, then watch the video right here. And of course, don't forget to subscribe by hitting the button right here. But I'm off one last ride, so I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you so much for watching.